Welcome to the Deconstructionist Deep Dive.
The podcast that doesn't just accept the story.
We break it
We examine the pieces.
and expose the machinery inside.
Let's dive in.
What if everything about modern leadership isn't just wrong, but is actually designed to keep you obedient rather than empowered? That is the central, deeply skeptical question driving our dive today. We're looking at a stack of sources, articles, research notes, manifestos, and they all seem to paint this picture. Modern corporate ideology, maybe organizational ideology.
Yeah.
It's like a sophisticated cognitive cage.
Exactly. And if you're listening and you felt that friction, right, that sense that the motivational posters, the workshops, they're saying one thing, but your actual experience, it screams something else entirely. Well, this deep dive is probably for you.
Yeah.
The mission here is really a forensic examination. We're looking at this structure that seems, on the surface, pretty benevolent, right? Helpful, even.
Right, leadership development. Sounds positive.
But we're going to meticulously uncover the logical architecture behind it and the rhetorical machinery, the stuff that's built specifically to manage how you think.
Manage cognition.
Yeah, manage cognition, make sure the institution runs smoothly, ensure compliance, and maybe filter out any, real creativity or dissent along the way.
Okay.
We are basically exposing the ideological blueprint, the one that profits when you, the listener, internalize these rules, when you accept them as just the way things are.
Okay, let's unpack this then, starting right at the bottom, at the foundation. Because any system, right, any dominant way of thinking, it rests on these non-negotiable premises, axioms, things you're just supposed to accept.
They're embedded so deep you don't even question them.
Exactly. And we pulled out 3 main axioms from this modern leadership framework we're looking at. And these are the really insidious building blocks, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. These are the things you have to swallow whole before the rest of the mechanism, the whole control system, can really take hold of your thinking.
Right. These aren't just nice suggestions for a better life.
No, not at all. They are the absolute bedrock of what we're calling the obedience machine. And they're designed very specifically to manage your expectations, your ideas about cause and effect, about success, about how you even interact with other people inside that system.
All right, let's get into the first one. Axiom 1, leadership determinism. You hear this everywhere, the phrase itself, everything rises and falls on leadership.
Oh, yeah. Ubiquitous.
It's punchy, sounds active, very appealing, especially in, cultures that value individualism.
Yeah.
But what's the critical deception? What's hidden inside that simple phrase?
Well, the deception is kind of elegant, really, in its simplicity, but it's ruthlessly effective at shifting responsibility. See, when you declare that everything rises and falls on leadership. Everything. You establish leadership as the primary cause, the main variable in pretty much all human effort. Doesn't matter if it's a small community project or the entire global economy. According to this axiom, leadership is the single most important factor, period.
Okay, but hang on. Isn't there some truth there? I mean, a bad decision from the top, a lack of vision, that does hurt an organization, right? If we just dismiss the leader's role entirely, don't we lose accountability?
That's the clever part. We absolutely need accountability. But we have to be careful not to confuse accountability for, say, a specific decision with systemic causality. The real function of this axiom, the reason it's so foundational to the obedience machine, isn't really about promoting better leadership.
Right.
It's about neutralizing systemic critique. Think about it. If a huge project fails or the company's stock price tanks, or maybe you listening right now, you're struggling to get ahead even though you're working 60 hours a week.
Right.
The axiom dictates the answer before you even ask the question. It can't be the system's fault. It can't be fragile supply chains or maybe predatory economic policies or deep historical inequalities. No, it must be the leader's fault. Or, and this is crucial, your own fault, your own lack of leadership skill. See how it works?
Yeah, I do. It pins all the cause, all the blame or credit onto this one single, easily identifiable human variable in the leader, or you. And that just shuts down any deeper critique, any questioning of the corporate structure itself or the political landscape or the whole economic model we're operating in. It just stops the conversation right at who messed up, instead of letting us ask, wait, why is this system seemingly designed to let these kinds of failures happen over and over again?
Precisely. It's a beautifully constructed mental trap. It diverts all that critical energy away from thinking about structural reform, real change, and redirects it towards personal improvement or leadership development.
Which coincidentally is what the entire industry sells you.
Funny how that works out, isn't it?
Right. Okay. That leads perfectly into the second axiom. Because this list one builds right on that individualism, that sort of instrumental view of things. Transactional value. The idea here is that value is created by intentionally adding value to people.
Notice the wording there. Intentionally adding value. That little word, intentionally, does a lot of heavy lifting.
How so?
It transforms every single human interaction you have, talking to a colleague, getting advice from a mentor, dealing with a client, even just being part of a community. It turns it into a calculated transaction, an instrumental act.
Right.
The focus shifts completely. It's not about, genuine connection or mutual understanding or just the joy of the relationship itself. No, it's all about the measurable, deliberate value add that you are providing in that moment.
It sounds good, though, doesn't it, on the surface? Like, be helpful, add value. Who can argue with that?
That's why it's insidious. But making it intentional and framing it purely as value, it starts to poison the well of genuine human connection. It subtly forces you to start categorizing people based on their utility to you or to the system.
So you're constantly judging.
You're forced, maybe consciously, maybe subconsciously, to constantly ask yourself, am I being an asset right now? Or am I a liability in this exchange? Is this interaction generating value? If I'm not adding measurable value according to the system's definition, am I wasting time?
It's deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It breaks down trust, surely. Real trust.
Completely. How can you have genuine, non-calculated trust in an environment like that? It basically turns your entire network, all your human connections, into a kind of portfolio.
Like stocks.
Yeah, like a stock portfolio that you have to constantly manage and optimize for the best return. It reduces friendship to networking. Mentorship becomes resource extraction. It's the commodification of relationships.
Okay, that's bleak. And then there's the third one, axiom 3. This feels like the promise that makes all the striving and the transactional stuff seem worthwhile. Mechanical mastery, this really simplistic input-output model for getting good at something. The idea that you can achieve real expertise just by following a quantified schedule. The classic example is 1 hour a day for 5 years.
Right, the 5-year expert myth. This is the total commodification of what it actually means to gain deep expertise. It offers this very tidy, very linear, very measurable path to success.
Just put in the hours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The promise is simple. Put in the prescribed amount of time, the quantitative hours, and you will succeed. You will achieve mastery. It sounds so achievable.
But it ignores so much, doesn't it?
It strips away almost everything important about actually developing expertise. The complexity of it, the fact that you need to fail sometimes, the huge influence of historical context or just luck, the need for creative leaps, the structural barriers that exist in so many fields, all gone. Reduced to hours logged.
So what happens if you follow the formula? You put in your hour a day for 5 years, and you're not a master. You haven't achieved what was promised. Who gets the blame then?
Well, according to the ideology, the blame falls squarely on you.
Of course.
The system says you must not have worked hard enough, or maybe you weren't focused enough. You didn't optimize your 1 hour properly. It can't be the model's fault.
Right.
And that narrative prevents you from challenging the premise itself. It stops you from saying, hang on, maybe I am working incredibly hard, but I'm blocked by structural inequality. Or maybe the market for this skill is saturated. Or maybe there are factors completely beyond my individual control.
It just redirects it back to personal failing.
It's a really cruel form of accountability, actually. It punishes genuine effort if that effort doesn't fit neatly into the system's simplistic, linear metrics.
Okay, before we move off the foundations, there's this rhetorical trick they use. How they define leadership itself. It's defined solely as influence.
Ah, yes. The radical oversimplification. This is a masterful move, rhetorically speaking.
Why? What does it achieve?
By boiling leadership down purely to influence, they manage to strip away all the inconvenient, challenging bits. Things like power dynamics.
Right. Actual power.
Actual power, coercion, institutional authority, structural privilege, the whole historical legacy of how that authority came to be, all of it just vanishes.
So the massive difference between, say, a CEO who can literally decide to lay off thousands of people with the stroke of a pen and a frontline worker trying to persuade their colleague to cover a shift. According to this definition, that's just a difference in the amount and type of influence they happen to wield.
That's exactly what it suggests. It renders the entire concept of leadership seemingly apolitical, morally neutral. It lets them sidestep the really difficult questions about who holds the actual tangible power.
Power you can feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did they get that power? What are the moral implications of using it? They just swap out the word power, which feels tangible, institutional, maybe even dangerous, and replace it with influence, which feels intangible, personal, fuzzy, and much easier to manage and talk about in a corporate training session.
And this engineered definition, this focus on influence, it feeds right into what you call the ultimate systemic mandate, the growth imperative.
Yes.
This mandatory shift they push from having a goal mindset to having this endless growth mindset.
Where the key question is never, okay, did I reach my goal? Or even, how long is this going to take? No, the question they want you asking constantly is, how far can I go?
Aim for the stars.
Yeah.
Indefinitely.
Exactly. This is the economic engine of the obedience machine. It creates this requirement for limitless, perpetual striving, constant performance. You are never, ever allowed to arrive. You can't rest. You can't be content with what you've achieved.
Because the ideology dictates
that if you stop striving, you start growing.
Yeah.
And if you stop growing, well, then you become irrelevant. You become, going back to axiom 2, a liability.
Wow. So this framework just locks you into this cycle. Constantly monitoring yourself, constantly anxious about not growing enough, which very conveniently for the organization
Translates directly into endless, measurable, and often profitable performance. You are literally required by the ideology to be perpetually dissatisfied with where you are right now.
Okay, and how do they prove this whole complex system works? What's the validation?
Well, often it's just anecdotal proof, but delivered with this air of absolute certainty. We saw source notes mentioning personal success stories. Someone claiming they built the 10th largest church or achieved some rapid entrepreneurial success.
Right, the guru story.
Exactly. And that single success story, often achieved under very specific, maybe unique circumstances, is then presented as irrefutable proof that the entire ideology works, universally, regardless of context or structure or just plain old luck.
One anecdote trumps all systemic analysis.
Pretty much.
Okay, so we've seen the ideological foundations. Now let's pivot. Let's look at the practical tools the system gives people, the methodological architecture, the how. How do they ensure compliance? Because it's not enough to just believe the axioms, right? You have to internalize the actual mechanisms of control. And they provide this highly regimented approach, systematized interaction, like a simple formula for how to connect with other humans.
Yeah, this is like the factory floor for processing emotions.
Yeah.
The source outlines this 5-step checklist: value, think, look, do, encourage.
Okay, break that down. What do those mean?
Well, individually, they sound pretty pragmatic, right? Value people means appreciate them. Think means understand their perspective. Look means be proactive, see what needs doing. Do is take action. Encourage is give feedback. Seems reasonable.
Sounds like basic decency almost.
On the surface, yes. But the danger comes when you formalize real human interaction into this kind of structured checklist. What happens then to the actual messy reality of human dynamics?
It gets flattened, simplified.
It reduces genuinely complex, nuanced things like real empathy or navigating deep conflict or building an organic shared vision or even just authentic camaraderie. It reduces all that to a 5-step procedure, a procedure designed for controlled behavioral modification.
So if you fail to connect with someone,
the ideology doesn't suggest, well, human interaction is complicated, or maybe the system we're in is creating friction. No, it suggests you simply failed to execute step 3 correctly. Or maybe step 4, go back and follow the procedure better next time.
it takes the unpredictable human element out of it, replaces it with a process, something you can monitor, train, evaluate.
Exactly. And the ultimate goal, the output of this whole interaction factory, it isn't really individual enlightenment or even organizational stability. According to the sources, it's something else. It's the multiplication principle.
Multiplication, meaning what?
The ultimate return on investment for all this leadership development, they argue, isn't your personal success. It's you developing other leaders.
Replication.
This is where the ideological machine starts to replicate itself virally. It turns you, the individual, into basically an unpaid agent for expanding the mental framework of the obedience machine.
You become a recruiter.
You become a node in the network, dedicated to recruiting and managing the next tier of obedience servants who will then go on to recruit others.
Okay, let's look at the core control mechanism they use to keep people in line, keep them striving, keep them compliant. You mentioned the leadership table, this promise of an inclusive space, getting a seat at the table, proximity to tower.
The leadership table. It's kind of a perfect psychological control system because it leverages 2 really deep human things: status anxiety and the desire to belong.
How does it work? Like a carrot and stick?
Exactly like a carrot and stick. The carrot is the promise of inclusion. Getting that coveted seat at the table, being near the decision makers, feeling like you're in the know. That promise incentivizes intense compliance. People will absolutely compromise their time, their health, their own values sometimes, just for the privilege of being invited into that exclusive space.
Okay, that's the carrot. What's the stick?
The stick is the threat of exclusion, and this is what keeps people compliant once they are notionally at the table or striving to get there. One of the source notes, Note 18, had this really chilling little phrase.
What was it?
Just, not everyone will remain.
Wow, short and sweet.
Devastatingly effective. That single line fosters this intense internalized competition among the leaders or aspiring leaders. The implied message is crystal clear. If you fail to meet the system's metrics, if your personal growth slows down, or heaven forbid, if you actually challenge the ideological framework,
You're out.
you will be cast out, ejected. And this ensures that people police themselves. They work harder, they adhere more closely to the ideology, they focus all their energy on just securing their spot at the table.
Rather than questioning if the table itself should exist, or if the people running it actually deserve that power.
Precisely. It diverts all critical energy inward and sideways into competition, away from challenging the structure itself.
It sounds like a nonstop low-grade performance review, but based on, ideological purity as much as results.
That's a good way to put it. And the system also hits very specific psychological pressure points to keep that performance up. Take the fear of insignificance. This comes from Node 4. One is too small a number to achieve greatness.
How does that work as pressure?
It weaponizes the very idea of individualism that it seems to promote elsewhere. That, quote, immediately frames independence, self-reliance, having your own purpose outside the system. It frames all that as inherently inadequate, as failure.
So you must be part of the group.
You must be part of this collective, the system, part of that multiplication chain we talked about if you want your life to have meaning. So your motivation shifts. It's no longer driven by, say, authentic purpose or genuine community responsibility. It becomes driven by the fear of being small, isolated, insignificant.
It tells you your worth isn't intrinsic. It's defined only by your role within their machine.
Exactly. Your value is purely extrinsic.
Then there's this pervasive narrative, the redemption narrative, which seems designed to precondition people to make them accept exploitation. This is Node 12. Character is built primarily through adversity and failure.
The sanctification of suffering in a corporate context. This subtly suggests that all the tough stuff you encounter may be exploitation, maybe a grueling workload, maybe institutional screw-ups, maybe even repeated humiliations. These aren't actually injustices inflicted on you by bad management or a flawed system. Oh, no. They are, in fact, necessary ingredients for building your character. You should be grateful for them.
That's a masterful psychological move. It trains you to be thankful for the very things that cause you pain. It reframes exploitation as a growth opportunity.
Precisely. It demands resilience, right? But resilience in the face of maybe manufactured scarcity or impossible demands, and it turns any potential righteous anger that might actually lead to change, it turns it inward. Self-blame instead of systemic critique.
Wow. Okay, and finally, under psychological pressure, there's this verbal trick, the one used to sound profound and shut down thinking. The bafflement tactic. The example was the tautology from Note 11. Experience is not the best teacher. Evaluated experience is. I swear, I have heard variations of this so many times, and it always sounds deep in the moment. Why does it work so well if, as you say, it's basically meaningless?
It works because it's crafted perfectly to sound profound while actually saying nothing new or insightful. If you really break it down, what is it saying? Learning requires learning. Reflection helps you grow. Well, duh, everyone knows that.
Right, it's obvious.
But when it's delivered by someone in a position of authority, a guru on stage, a CEO in a meeting, a speaker at a conference, it serves to just obfuscate. It creates this impression that the speaker possesses some kind of special esoteric knowledge.
Makes you feel a bit dumb if you don't get it immediately.
Exactly. It demands your silent, uncritical acceptance because questioning it feels like admitting you didn't grasp the profundity. It's an intellectual diversion. It stops you from thinking critically about what's really being said, or more importantly, what isn't being said about the complexities of genuine learning and experience.
Okay, so we've seen the axioms, the control architecture, the psychological levers, these mechanisms they use to trap us mentally. But as you hinted earlier, this isn't entirely new, is it? Where does this modern setup find its roots historically, and what ideas, maybe revolutionary ideas, challenge its core assumptions? This is where we bring in that table of contrasting frameworks you mentioned to offer different ways of seeing.
Absolutely. We can pretty clearly show that this modern leadership ideology is really just the latest iteration, maybe a corporate-friendly, sanitized version of much older control mechanisms, things used throughout history to maintain hierarchy and manage populations.
Okay, let's take the first big one, leadership determinism. That core idea that the leader dictates everything, success or failure. Where does that come from historically? What gives authority that kind of absolute flavor?
Well, it mirrors pretty closely, actually, the logic of Calvinist predestination back during the Reformation.
Predestination? How so?
In Calvinism, worldly success, having wealth, prosperity, material achievements, wasn't just good fortune. It was interpreted as a visible sign, a tangible signal of God's favor that you are one of the elect.
Ah. Oh.
Today, in this secularized corporate version, your professional success, your high position, your big salary, that signals your innate leadership skill. It functions in the same way it grants you a kind of secular divine right to your power and your privilege. It becomes a modern, supposedly meritocratic justification for why the existing hierarchy is correct and deserved.
Makes the whole structure feel inevitable, almost sacred in a weird way.
Yeah.
But what's the challenge to that? You mentioned alternatives.
Right. One profound challenge comes from philosophies like Taoism, specifically the concept of wu-wei.
Wu-wei. What's that?
It's often translated as non-action or maybe effortless action. It emphasizes acting in harmony with the natural flow of things, with the Tao, rather than trying to force things through aggressive, centralized leadership.
So the opposite of intentional influence.
Exactly. A leader practicing wu-wei doesn't grab control and dictate. They facilitate the natural order so skillfully, so subtly that great things happen and then the people involved believe they did it themselves. It completely inverts the modern, assertive, I'm in charge model.
That's fascinating. And you also mentioned a more direct challenge.
Yes, a more antagonistic one comes from anarchist theory.
Anarchism. How does that apply?
Well, anarchism doesn't just critique bad leaders. It fundamentally argues that the very existence of fixed hierarchy itself, regardless of how skilled or charismatic the leader might be, that is the core problem. That structure needs to be dismantled.
So while the modern ideology accepts the hierarchy as a given and just wants to manage it better.
The anarchist critique questions the legitimacy of the entire structure from the ground up.
Okay, let's move to that definition. Leadership as influence. We talked about how it's a softer word for power. What does that echo, maybe in political thought?
It really feels like a sanitized, corporate-friendly version of Machiavellianism, especially the more cynical readings of Machiavelli, where the main goal, maybe the only goal, is acquiring and keeping power.
How so?
Well, defining leadership just as influence is a way to talk about power dynamics in a business meeting without actually using the uncomfortable word power. It lets the system teach people how to wield power, how to manipulate, how to gain advantage, without ever having to explicitly acknowledge the moral weight or the ethical implications of what they're actually doing.
It's power dynamics laundered through palatable language. But what's the counterpoint? You mentioned communal ideas.
A really strong one is Ubuntu philosophy, primarily from Southern Africa.
Ubuntu, like the phrase, I am because we are.
Exactly that. Ubuntu defines a person through their connections and relationships with others. It frames leadership not as individual power or influence, but entirely as communal responsibility, as service to the group. The focus is on the collective well-being, on reciprocity, on strengthening the community, not on individual advancement through calculated value adds.
That's a radically different starting point. And then there's the more complex structural critique. Foucaultian postmodernism.
Yes, and this is really crucial for understanding the deeper mechanisms at play here. Foucault constantly reminds us that power, or influence as they call it, is never neutral. It's never just benign persuasion. It's always a micro-expression of diffuse power relations woven throughout the entire system.
So power isn't just the boss shouting orders.
No. In a modern organization, power operates through the performance review system you have to participate in. It's in the security camera watching you. It's in the requirement for constant self-monitoring and growth. It's embedded in the very structure of the meetings you attend.
Okay.
So defining leadership as just influence isn't just simplifying. It's a sophisticated tool for enforcing discipline and control, especially when overt top-down force isn't practical or acceptable anymore.
Got it. Okay, last one on this comparison. Adding value, axiom 2. The idea that every interaction needs to be an intentional value add. You said this is basically capitalism in its purest form.
Yeah, if you take it to its logical conclusion. If all interaction has to be quantified, has to provide a deliberate, measurable value add, then every single human interaction becomes purely instrumental. It's judged by its utility within the system.
So if you can't monetize it or measure it or somehow feed it back into the profit structure.
The system basically deems it worthless,
Yeah.
or worse, inefficient. Genuine acts of kindness or connection just for its own sake, spontaneous help. These aren't just ignored, they're potentially seen as distractions from value-creating activities.
That's grim. What's the ethical antidote to that?
A powerful one comes from feminist care ethics.
Care ethics. How does that counter the value add idea?
Care ethics argues that the foundation of real ethical behavior isn't calculation or transaction, it's responding to genuine human need. It's about maintaining the web of relationships that support us all. It's about taking responsibility for those who are vulnerable or dependent on us.
So it's fundamentally non-transactional.
Completely. It rejects the whole premise that we need to assign a calculated value to our interactions. Instead, it prioritizes things like mutual dependency, empathy, responsiveness to vulnerability. The very things that the modern leadership system, with its focus on constant strength and value add, often labels explicitly as liabilities.
This whole philosophical comparison is vital, isn't it? Because it really drives home that this modern leadership ideology isn't some kind of inevitable truth about the world. It's a specific and arguably quite cynical choice. A framework built explicitly to reinforce the current power structures, the status quo. We also need to touch on how they use stories, narratives, to reinforce it internally. Like that cautionary tale about Claude from Node 23. What was that about?
Right, the Claude story. It's basically an anecdote they tell about some high-ranking person, someone with a big title and formal authority, but who supposedly has no real influence, no connection with people. And because of that, he fails.
Okay, so the surface message seems to be, titles aren't enough, you need real relationships.
Exactly. It sounds like a lesson about being authentic. But its actual function, when you analyze it within the system, is arguably much darker. It serves as a kind of parable.
A parable for what?
It directs your energy away from questioning the formal power structures themselves, questioning the legitimacy of that title or the institution that granted it. And instead, it redirects all your energy back towards relentlessly cultivating those intangible, transactional metrics of influence that the system wants you to focus on, because those are things the system can easily monitor, measure, and control.
So it reinforces the system's internal logic by saying, look, the formal power structures are fine, they're legitimate, you just need to play the influence game better within them.
Precisely. Don't challenge the game board, just get better at playing by its rules.
Wow. Okay, we've laid out the framework, the controls, the historical echoes, the philosophical counters. Now we get to the real core of the critique from the source material. These 7 specific deceptions embedded deep in the structure, viewed through what they call the uncompromising freedom lens. What's the first big lie they identify?
Deception number 1 is the great man fallacy in democratic clothing.
Okay, explain that. It sounds like the old idea of the exceptional individual, the hero.
It is. It's basically the historical concept of the divine right of kings, but cleverly repackaged for the 21st century. Instead of justifying elite power through God's will, it uses the more modern, more palatable language of leadership skill.
To justify what?
To justify the massive salaries, the often unchecked authority, sometimes even the almost hereditary nature of power within corporate dynasties or political families. It makes extreme inequality seem deserved based on supposedly superior individual ability.
And the freedom lens critique, what's the harm?
The critique points to the direct societal harm. This fallacy leads directly to blaming individuals for systemic failures. It allows society, for instance, to blame unemployed people for job shortages, or blame the poor for their poverty. Because remember axiom 1, everything rises and falls on leadership.
So clearly they just failed to lead their own lives effectively enough.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the same logic heaps praise on the elites for their success, even when that success might be overwhelmingly due to structural advantages, inherited wealth, or just historical privilege. It personalizes success and failure, obscuring the systemic context.
Okay, let's jump ahead to deception number 3, the 5-year expert lie. This ties back to that mechanical mastery axiom, right? Translating it into this false promise of quick competence.
Yeah, it's like the hasty generalization fallacy straight out of the self-help industrial complex playbook. This notion that you can achieve genuine competence in almost any complex field, medicine, engineering, art, whatever, just by clocking in one measurable hour a day for 5 years.
And the critique is that this ignores
It fundamentally contradicts deep traditions of mastery, like the Japanese shokunin ideal. The shokunin embodies lifelong dedication, deep humility, a constant striving to learn and improve, recognizing that true mastery is this asymptotic goal. You always approach it, but you never fully finally arrive.
Right. And the freedom lens view on the result of this lie.
It argues the cognitive toll is huge.
Yeah.
This lie creates deeply anxious individuals, people constantly watching the clock, measuring their progress against this arbitrary 5-year deadline. They become prone to burnout.
Because they hit the mark.
They hit that 5-year mark, and they inevitably realize they're still far from true, deep, reliable expertise. And because the system told them the formula was infallible, they're psychologically crushed. It leads to self-blame, I must have done it wrong, rather than a critique of the unrealistic, commodified model they were sold in the first place.
Okay. Then deception number 4, the fetishization of failure. This feels like a really powerful emotional lever, especially if you need a workforce that's compliant but also resilient, able to handle constant pressure.
Absolutely essential for that. This is basically the secularized version of the old Christian narrative. Suffering leads to salvation, applied to the workplace.
So if you fail, if you hit a setback, if you face exploitation.
But the system tells you, this isn't bad. This is necessary. This is a rite of passage. It insists that failure and adversity must be celebrated, reframed positively, treated as a learning opportunity.
And the freedom lens analysis sees this as what?
Its primary function, according to this critique, is to disarm righteous anger. By constantly framing exploitation or burnout or just plain bad luck as a valuable learning opportunity, the system ensures the worker internalizes the injustice.
Instead of getting angry at the cause.
Right. You're taught to be almost grateful for the trial because it's building character. Instead of directing your anger outwards at the managers who created the exploitative conditions or the shareholders who benefit from your failure, you turn it inwards. It transforms organizational mistakes into exercises in your personal development.
Clever. And structurally, deception number 5, the inclusivity trap. The leadership table. We talked about the carrot and stick, but what's the function of the trap itself, according to this view?
Well, the analysis draws a strong parallel here to the medieval feudal system.
Feudalism.
How? In feudalism, there was often a theoretical welcome, a theoretical path for mobility, maybe joining the Lord's court. But the practical reality for most was serfdom, being tied to the land. The leadership table functions similarly. You're welcomed, in theory, into this inclusive space, but its real purpose is diversionary. All your energy, your ambition, your critical thinking energy that might otherwise be spent organizing with your peers, advocating for better conditions, or fundamentally questioning the institution's legitimacy, all that energy gets completely diverted.
Into what?
Into internal competition, competing against your colleagues for that coveted validation, for proximity to power, for temporary inclusion within the existing structure.
So it reinforces the powers of the managerial class by getting the managed to focus all their competitive energy on each other rather than on the managers.
Precisely. It keeps the lower ranks divided and striving for the approval of the upper ranks.
Okay, now let's shift focus slightly. Let's look at the deceptions that really manipulate emotional and social trust. The human element, where this ideology often does the most damage. What's deception number 2?
Deception number 2 is the commodification of human connection. This flows directly from axiom 2, the transactional value idea. It creates this incredibly poisonous transactional environment by setting up a false dichotomy. In every interaction, you are either a value add or you are a liability.
There's no middle ground, no room for just being.
According to this framework, no. There's no space for simply existing or relating authentically or connecting intrinsically just because you're both human. It all has to be framed in terms of utility.
And this poisons relationships because, well, trust can't grow if you're constantly evaluating someone's usefulness, can it?
Absolutely not. The freedom lens critique sees this as turning every potentially genuine human interaction into managing that transactional portfolio we talked about. It needs constant optimization.
Right.
You simply cannot develop deep, genuine trust or real mutual support when you're subconsciously or consciously assessing the potential utility or the lack of utility of every single colleague, friend, or connection you make. This ideology forces us, really trains us, to see each other primarily through the lens of productivity and measurable usefulness, not through our shared humanity.
It's incredibly isolating, actually. Okay, deception number 6. Weaponized vulnerability. This idea of performative vulnerability, Note 20 mentioned this. It seems like it's almost an expected trait now for modern leaders, isn't it, to share their struggles?
Oh, absolutely. It's become part of the playbook.
Yeah.
But the critique here draws on sociology, specifically Irving Goffman's idea of dramaturgy life as theater. This vulnerability is almost always a front stage performance.
Meaning it's carefully controlled.
Exactly. It's a controlled presentation designed purely to manage the audience's impression of the leader. The leader shares a carefully curated failure story, one they've already overcome, naturally. Or they talk about a past struggle that's now safely resolved. They never share a current risk, a deep, unresolved, authentic vulnerability that might actually make them look weak now.
It's the rehearsed story, the one that always ends with a neat little lesson learned designed to make the audience feel sympathy, feel connected, perceive the leader as authentic.
Right. And the freedom lens analysis exposes the deeper function. It makes control feel like therapy.
How does that work?
By presenting themselves as flawed but ultimately resilient, the leader, the master, trains you to trust them on this emotional, seemingly vulnerable level. They appear to be offering a kind of therapeutic alliance. We're all human, we all struggle.
But it hides the power dynamic.
It completely hides the mechanism of the whip, the actual institutional power they hold over you. While they perform their safe vulnerability, they encourage you to share your authentic vulnerability, which can then, of course, be noted, managed, perhaps even leveraged against you later within that same power structure. Trust is engineered, then potentially exploited.
That's chilling. Okay, the final one. Deception number 7. The multiplication scam.
Right. This goes back to the multiplication principle, the idea that the main goal is developing other leaders to replicate the system. The critique argues this goal is sourced directly from classic pyramidal structures.
You mean like multi-level marketing schemes, MLMs?
Precisely. MLMs, or even just highly stratified traditional corporate hierarchies. The fundamental organizational goal isn't actually liberating individuals or fostering authentic growth. It's purely about ideological replication.
Spreading the doctrine.
Spreading the doctrine as efficiently as possible. The Freedom Lens concludes that the ultimate aim of this system is to turn you into an unpaid franchisee of the mental prison. Your primary function becomes not achieving your own freedom or questioning the rules, but dedicating your energy to recruiting and managing the next tier of obedient servants below you. This ensures the ideology propagates itself with maximum efficiency and minimum cost to the people at the very top, the central managerial class.
Okay, we have covered the entire architecture now, from those foundational axioms that cleverly shift causality and responsibility through the manipulative psychology using fear and reframing suffering, all the way to these 7 core deceptions that really lock down compliance. Let's try to synthesize this. What is the ultimate central lie hidden right at the heart of this whole modern leadership industry?
The central lie is this. The entire ideology, everything we've discussed, it operates on the unspoken, unchallenged presupposition that the current hierarchy, the existing structure of power, of capital, of control, is fundamentally legitimate, and that it can only be improved or managed better, never fundamentally challenged or abolished.
So it's not actually a call for a new world. It's not imagining a different way to organize society or work. It's not about shifting power in any meaningful way.
Not at all. It is, at its core, a reformist plea. It's a highly sophisticated, psychologically astute argument designed simply to improve the management of the human plantation.
The human plantation. Strong words.
But it systematically, deliberately avoids the fundamental moral and structural question of whether the plantation itself should even exist in the first place.
And therefore, its real purpose, its defined output, it's not about producing free thinkers, is it? Or self-aware individuals, or genuinely liberated citizens.
No. Its purpose is singular and clear when you deconstruct it, to produce more effective, more compliant, and perpetually self-improving servants for the existing system.
And recognizing that, seeing that ultimate deception for what it is, that's the beginning of what the source calls the call to cognitive Armageddon. The path towards freeing your own mind, towards cognitive liberation, it has to start by rejecting the system's core premises, by changing the question.
Exactly. We have to stop internalizing and constantly trying to answer the question the system demands we ask ourselves every single morning. How can I be a better leader today? Or how can I add more value? Or how can I influence more effectively?
And instead, we need to start demanding an answer to the questions that actually break the system's frame.
Yeah.
Questions like, wait a minute, why should anyone be led in this way? And maybe even more fundamentally, What actually gives this hierarchy the right to exist and hold this power over us in the first place?
And this mental shift isn't just abstract philosophy, it has practical implications. It means consciously, actively rejecting the transactional value that this ideology assigns to human beings and relationships.
It means demanding transparency about power, real power, instead of accepting the polite, fuzzy rhetoric about influence.
And maybe most importantly, on a personal level, it means we have to abolish that internalized job title, the title of servant that this entire ideology, subtly but relentlessly, assigns to every single individual caught within its grasp.
And that's our deep dive for this week.
Remember, the most dangerous illusion is the one you don't know you're in.
But now you know. So here's our question for you. Knowing what you know now, what's one small rebellious act you can do this week to reclaim your own cognition from the leadership industry?
Let us know in the comments.
Question the narrative. Deconstruct the dogma. See the system.
We'll see you next time. Stay skeptical.
Thank you for joining us.